Welcome to the major regions of Egypt. Life in ancient Egypt was concentrated along the shores of the Nile and divided into two regions. Lower Egypt was situated on the Nile Delta near the Mediterranean, and Upper Egypt was at the south reaching into Africa. Due to its proximity to the Mediterranean, temperatures in Lower Egypt were less extreme than in Upper Egypt. Until 3100 BCE and the unification of Egypt, each region had its own pharaoh and crown. Lower Egypt's crown was red and marked with symbols of papyrus and bees. Upper Egypt's crown was white with symbols of lotus and sedge grass. Both regions had competing major cities, most notably Memphis in Lower Egypt and Thebes in Upper Egypt. There were different religious cults in both regions, each worshipping their own major gods. Many of the temples were designed in such a way as to represent the two regions, and ceremonies often incorporated Upper and Lower Egypt in their rituals.
Welcome to Temples and Priests. From its foundation, the city of Memphis favored worship of the god Ptah. The main temple of Ptah was known as Hut-Ka-Ptah, meaning Palace of the Ka of Ptah. The name of the temple. Temples were the center of religious, political, and economic life in ancient Egypt. These sacred places were viewed as the literal home of the gods and goddesses. As such, every aspect of them required care and located in the center of Memphis, the Temple of Ptah was the most prominent and imposing building in the city. The long walkway leading toward the temple, known as the Dromos, was guarded by rows of sphinxes. The entire sacred area was designed to keep the statue of the god protected, deep within the sacred enclosures that surrounded it. Dromos courtyard, with the surrounding portico graced with columns carved to resemble palm trees. During special festivals, the general population was allowed to enter this location, but under no circumstances would they be allowed into the sacred spaces beyond the courtyard. The Memphis Alabaster Sphinx was discovered in 19... Erosion has destroyed the original engravings, making it difficult to determine when it was created. The size of the imposing sculpture reflects the importance it had to the temple during the New Kingdom. This Sphinx is one of the few remaining artifacts from the ruins of Memphis to survive. In Egyptian culture, some animals were associated with gods, while others were considered to be living gods. The Apis bull was believed to be a divine entity. The earliest mention of the Apis bull in ancient Egypt goes back as far as the first Egyptian dynasty. Originally the symbol of fertility, the Apis bull was linked to the god Ra, with the image of the sun carried between its horns. Later it was associated with Osiris, the ruler, thus becoming the Apis bull lived with its harem in a sacred barn located in an enclosure in the Temple of Ptah. Like other living divinities, the mortal incarnation of the Apis bull was prayed to, and when it died, it was given a luxurious funeral, which included mummification. Until the reign of Ramses II, the Apis bulls were buried in individual graves in Saqqara. During the 26th dynasty, the bodies of the bulls were buried in enormous stone. Ancient Egyptians believed that temple rituals were essential to maintain order in the cosmos and allow communication between humans and gods. Details of the ceremonies found on temple walls provide a thorough overview of the stages of the daily ritual. The high priest would first awaken the sleeping god with a chant. Then the seals of the shrines. The god was then washed with incense-infused water and its mouth rinsed with mineral salts. The cleansing was followed by adorning the... Heredity was the primary source of new recruits. Now this position. At the high priest candidates made their way up the ranks of the temple hierarchy. In the dynasty, Thebes became the capital of an almost entirely theocratic government. The educational institution in ancient Egypt was known as the House of Life, attended by the offspring of the elite and the clergy. Only two known centers have been uncovered, one in the abandoned city of Akhetaten and one at... The House of Life offered training for the elite, destined for occupations such as astronomers, doctors. Not limited to instruction for young students, the House of Life was a source of reference for many scholars, with rooms dedicated to papyri of many disciplines. Because papyri were preserved there, the Greco-Romans referred to the House of Life as a library. Ancient Egyptian economy was based on an unequal system of redistribution of goods. The state of Egypt collected the crops, and the temples distributed them throughout the... There are records of pharaohs making offerings of large tracts of land and temple compound to better control the redistribution of goods. The size of the goods, combined with every other function filled by temples, only serves to confirm